have an exciting episode this week, Holy Week. This week, we're going to check in with Miss Sobalski, the Associate Director for Campus Ministry at Lancaster Catholic High School, and see what she thinks about celebrating Holy Week this week in this most unique situation that we find ourselves. And also with Frina, Father Arena, our chaplain extraordinaire as well, who will share some thoughts on how to really make this Holy Week awesome and help us as we continue this journey in this desert where we seem to be separated physically from all of the things that we purport to love and the people, our extended family and friends we love. And then we also check in with Sister Danielle, who is the principal at Sacred Heart School in Lancaster. And Sister has a big supporter of Lancaster Catholic and does a great job over at Sacred Heart. And she's been a regular participant almost since day one of the online rosary that we host every morning at 9 a.m. So without further ado, let's get started with this week's episode. First up is none other than Miss Sobalski. That's right, our own little Noelle. So, Noelle, what's going on in your world? Hello, Miss Sobalski.
Hello, Mr. Barrett. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I hope you're doing well also.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So on today's podcast, since it's in the middle of Holy Week, I thought we'd talk briefly about what can we do to make Holy Week a better Holy Week, given the fact that it's not going to be a normal Holy Week like it would. I mean, normally we would be in school today, and tomorrow would be a day off. So what's your thoughts on that?
I think one thing to really keep in mind during this is that you can still experience the Mass and everything we normally do during Holy Week, going to Holy Thursday Mass and a Good Friday service. And if you go to Easter Vigil, you can still go to the Easter Vigil. So it just might take a little more time to do a little more research of when your church or another church will be having these services. But it's definitely good to keep in mind to keep going and doing kind of what you would normally would. But because we end up having so much more time on our hands, we can do some other things too and take more time. So maybe you take 20 minutes out of your day to take a moment to pray, because this is a time for you to do that. I know something for me this year that I realized on Palm Sunday is that I know like coming up, a lot of us know Holy Thursday, Good Friday, Easter. We know what those gospels are, like Jesus washing the feet, Jesus on the cross, Jesus rising. But for some reason this Palm Sunday, I realized how much I'm personally like Peter, that I talk a big talk and then I'm probably would go deny Jesus 3 times or something.
Right.
So now I'm like, wow, I really want to take that with me during Holy Week. So today, in my prayer, I just took a couple minutes and I was like, okay, what would Peter probably be doing right now, the Tuesday before Easter? What would he be saying? What would his conversation with Jesus be? So maybe since we know these stories so well, if you choose a person who you're I think I'm a lot like John.
Hopefully not Judas.
Yes, don't choose Judas. Maybe a different person. And so find somebody in these stories that you relate to, and then every day you can kind of look at it okay, what would Mary be doing the Wednesday before Jesus is crucified? Or what would Veronica be doing? Or St. John? Or maybe one of the other apostles that aren't mentioned as much.
Right, that's a great idea. And I think, too, just making an effort today and Wednesday and Thursday as well, just to even a few extra minutes to pray a rosary or to spend some time in prayer, just think about your life a little bit and think about the changes that have occurred since you've been forced to be at home. And then what is the things that you realize maybe you valued more than you thought you did. One of the big ones that you and I both noticed when we've been digitally hanging out with students is suddenly they miss going to school, and they miss being in the physical place of Lancaster Catholic.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think just taking stock of what's important to you. Maybe you're seeing your folks in a different way, or your siblings in a different way, or maybe you're just realizing that endless hours of PlayStation may be filling your time, but it's kind of an empty activity, or maybe not. I don't know.
Well, I think another thing then is like we started this Lenten journey like way different scenario that we were like in school normally, we had our normal activities. And so whatever we sacrificed at the time, like probably had to do a lot with what we were kind of going through at the moment. And now it seems to change a whole bunch. And so maybe finding something extra or a little more to sacrifice this week, because this is like the hardcore week. And so we've like realized different things. So maybe you're spending more time on video games. Maybe you're like spending a whole bunch of time on TikTok or Facebook or something like that, that you didn't before because you didn't have time for it. So maybe this week you can find something that isn't necessary that maybe you can give up a little more.
Thanks, Miss Sobalski, as always. Excited to hear from you. Miss seeing you and being in the office together and doing all that normal stuff we do in campus ministry. Hopefully soon we'll be back at it. So next up, though, we have Father Arena, our chaplain, sharing a few words on his thoughts from the standpoint of a priest on how this Holy Week and this Easter can be the most beneficial to us spiritually. Well, hello, Father Arena. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's good to see you, Mr. Bamert.
Yes, good to see you, Padre Extraordinaire. Welcome to this week's episode of the Camp Min podcast. So, as we did last week, we're checking in with you for a little spiritual one too to keep us going, and we're going to do this like tag team. So, as I actually spoke with Miss Sobalski about a little bit in her check-in, tell me your thoughts on managing this Holy Week, just as a Holy Week, like what we should be doing, and then in light of this really unique situation that we're in.
Right. Well, I mean, in some senses, this Holy Week is actually we can look at as an opportunity, as opposed to some of the other Holy Weeks we've experienced in the past, because, like before all of this happened, we were probably making a lot of plans about travel and about a lot of the different things that we were going to be doing. And having our celebration of Holy Week was just another thing to squeeze in there in the midst of everything. But now we have at a point where it's like everything in the world almost stops. And it's not, we're saying, that of course it stopped for a good reason. Like, obviously it's awful what's going on, but nevertheless, it has kind of stopped. And we don't have all those other things and obligations and plans going on that we usually would at this time. But the fact is, even if, plans are canceled, or even if trips are canceled, religion's not canceled. It's still happening.
And you're not saying that those things are inherently bad. Like, it's not like
no, not at all.
And those things are bad things.
No, not at all. But one of the problems is that, and this isn't just for our time, it's any time in human history, we have a problem where we can easily get distracted, like by all the necessities and things in life that kind of pull our attention away from other things. And it's so important to keep that primary focus on the faith at all times. And we have this situation now where we really don't have all those other things to pull our attention, because those things have been either canceled or postponed. And and if anything, it might actually be an opportunity for us then to focus in all the more on what has always been important, which is our faith. And so in the celebration of Holy Week, we might not be able to get to Mass physically like we usually do, but we can still enter into the spirit of it. I mean, of course, there's always the live streams, and that's something we should keep doing. But now that we have the time, we could use that to do things like, go over the readings ahead of time, or over some of the prayers ahead of time, or read about what is the history of Holy Week. Why do we do what we do? And if anything, kind of come out a little bit stronger in our appreciation for it, now that we kind of have some time to do that.
Yeah, and the other thing that comes to mind too is, I know this is a struggle that I have, which is accepting the fact that for reasons outside of my control, we cannot be at Mass, and the whole. And there's certainly lots of things that can be discussed about the why and if it should happen or shouldn't happen. But in reality, we're here in this place where, for whatever reason, we're not able to celebrate Mass and to go to confession and do those normal things. So, like, how would you suggest that we process that? And I'm sure you're struggling with it too. I mean, as a priest, this is like good for this year. I mean, this is the Super Bowl of your year.
Right.
It's the treadmill. Like, so, talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, so of all the church's celebrations, really, when we get to Holy Week, this is really some of the most, I don't know what's a good word to put it as, like, potent, one of those most potent times of the church's year, when you could even just feel how different things are, because almost every single day of Holy Week is something that's its own unique celebration in many ways, but particularly the Triduum, with Holy Thursday evening with the Mass of the Lord's Supper, going into Good Friday, and then Holy Saturday with the Vigil. And in many ways, I think it can actually be very helpful in the sense that we always account the week by, like, our general standards of, like, oh, I have school or I have work, and then there's the weekend. Or we might, have a general sense of a calendar based off of certain major, national holidays and things. And, well, what happens when all of those things are kind of, like we said, on pause? And then I don't mean just literally keeping track of the days, but I mean, like, having an experience of each and every day as if it is something that is important, something that matters. Well, when you have the liturgical calendar, especially this week, really helps you to do that. Where instead of just focusing on it's good to keep abreast of all the information that we have going out right now, with keeping up with the news and everything. But instead of just seeing that, to realize that this is a week about our Lord, even with a pandemic. And so to enter into that in a special way by, like I said, going to the readings, going to the prayers, and trying to spiritually travel with Jesus through his passion this week. And each day you can do that in a unique way. Like I said, those things are already kind of written out for us, but especially when we get to Holy Thursday and Good Friday, commemorating those things, not just by watching them on the live stream, but maybe taking time to, do some more spiritual reading, taking some time to talk about why this is important to us, and actually having these spiritual conversations, and realizing that this week is still a special week, regardless of all the things going on. And in fact, Holy Week itself, what are we commemorating? We're commemorating our Lord's sacrifice, right? And that was certainly a difficult and awful experience. But through that, there is incredible joy. In fact, the source of our joy. Well, this week we all have a special suffering to experience in our Holy Week, but it doesn't have to distract us from commemorating our Lord's gift of selfless love. In fact, could be, if we choose to, let it help us enter into it more deeply by realizing that, we too have crosses to bear, and they have a reason, and they have a purpose, and they're meant to not just strengthen us, but to draw us closer to our Lord and closer to one another. So like I said, use this opportunity as a time to not only grow in your own prayer and to follow along with the readings and the prayers of the liturgy, but to discuss these things at home and try to think, well, what are some ways at home that we, each of us as in our families can remember or commemorate this week?
Right.
Whether it's, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, this idea,
I heard some reporter saying something. This is the first time ever that we're not celebrating Easter, and it's like, no, no, this is not. No, you don't understand.
Yeah, like I said,
understand.
religion's not canceled. It's still happening, and even that whole misnomer, like, oh, mass is canceled. Well, mass is not canceled. It's still happening.
It's just you're not invited right now.
Well, yeah, I guess you could put it that way. But I mean, but it's a good reminder. Okay, so there's another thing here. This is a very, very good reminder to us of what is the mass, because the mass isn't just this thing that I get something out of by attending, like a concert or, a sports event. It's this idea that I still benefit from the liturgy even when I'm not physically present, because grace is not something bound by time and space. The fact is, even if you aren't physically at the church for these things when the priest is celebrating them, it doesn't mean that you're not there, you're not connected. God's not, you can't box God in, literally, like he's stuck inside the four walls of a church and I just can't get to it. No, that's not how that happens. Right. I mean, like, what do you remember Pope Francis's, the extraordinary Urbi et Orbi blessing he did? He did it from Rome.
Right.
I wasn't in Rome, and yet I still received the blessing.
Right.
The idea is grace is not as nice as it's so important in our faith to have the tangible, like the things that we can touch, see, perceive with our senses, which includes being physically present at these celebrations. But remember, we have to remind ourselves that, our faith isn't just about an experience of, things that touch our five senses, that it's more than that. Those things help us enter into it better, but the core of what it is it's spiritual thing. And spiritual realities are not locked in by concrete walls. We are still touched by the grace of what is happening. It's so important and so beautiful. And to say, but once again, it's hard for me, and I have to keep reminding myself of this and saying this. It is hard for me to feel what you guys are feeling, because I am physically still present at the liturgy.
Right.
I am still actually receiving our Lord in the Eucharist. So it's not the same experience for me. Like, I'm locked away with Jesus. And so, like,
he's not so good at a card game, but there's, or a board game.
No. He's not much into board games or anything, it turns out. But he's really good about being God, and that's what I need him to be anyway. So
right. That's great advice. Well, Father, thanks for that quick hit of spiritual food for us. I think when this is all said and done, hopefully we look back on this as a time of growth, spiritual growth,
right.
And my prayer for all of our students and our families and our community is that we come out of this desert better.
Right.
And
can I leave you with one last thing?
Absolutely. Fire away.
Just one last thing.
Sure.
So in the Liturgy of the Hours, which is these prayers that we as priests and a lot of religious monks and nuns and sisters that pray every day, there was a reading maybe like a month or 2 months ago, but from St. Augustine. And he was talking about the idea of growth and desire. Okay. And so he takes as an example, of course, remembering when he lived, which is obviously not the modern day. So
right.
But he says, imagine if somebody were saying, if you as a simple man were told, hey, if you go to this one person, this one guy, he'll give you all the grain that he can. That if he'll fill up. If you bring a sack, he'll fill up that sack with all the grain that it can hold. And you're thinking, man, I want to get as much as I can. And said, wouldn't that man stretch the bag out? Wouldn't he try to push it to its limits before it tears to get it as big as possible so he can receive as much grain as possible? It's like, well, so too. Sometimes our Lord allows us to have these experiences where we do not yet receive the consolation of his presence or the consolation of certain graces, not because he's trying to punish us, but he wants us to grow in our desire. He wants our hearts to be stretched out all the more, because then we can receive even more from him. And in this time where we are really left to not we're left in a situation where we don't have access to the sacraments or the Eucharist as much as we're used to. This is an opportunity for us to grow in desire. Now, that's not going to be comfortable, because you imagine if that, the bag that the farmer is holding to stretch out, imagine if it was a living thing being stretched out, it would probably feel pain.
Right.
Well, same thing with us. We're being stretched out. It hurts. But the reward is that we will receive more of God and his grace than we ever would have before, because our desire has grown. And so, yeah, I think, like you said, coming out on the other side of this, hopefully we ourselves will be spiritually transformed. But we have to do our part. We have to we can't just give up on our faith at this time. We have to yearn for it all the more, and allow ourselves to feel that little bit of hurt of not having the joy of receiving him. But knowing that when we do receive him again, especially in the Eucharist, it'll be all the more rich, all the more deep and profound.
That's so. Awesome. I've not heard that analogy from St. Augustine. That's beautiful. Like that, really, that puts it in very human terms. Like
right. He's better at this stuff than me. That's why he's a saint.
There's no new material. You just steal the old stuff, right?
Hey, why reinvent the wheel? But anyway.
Yeah. So anyway,
I appreciate being able to,
Yeah, that's good. It's good to have you on. And next week we'll try to check in again for our Easter week podcast and see where we are in the world and our faith. And it's so great to have you as part of our Catholic High community, Father. And for those who are just watching, I'm sure I can say we wish you a most blessed Easter as you, while physically maybe kind of alone, at least you got Jesus. So you bear your cross and we bear our cross, and we move forward in grace and love for each other, right?
Yep.
Awesome.
Amen.
All right. Signing off. See you next week.
All right. God bless. Bye.
And finally on today's show, we have an awesome interview with Sister Danielle. Sister Danielle is the principal of Sacred Heart School in Lancaster. And she's been a regular on our 9 a.m. live streamed rosary that Campus Ministry hosts each and every Monday through Friday. Sister shares some thoughts on just doing ministry digitally and how we're trying to stay connected as a Catholic community. Well, good morning, Sister Danielle. How are you today?
Good morning, Art. I'm doing well. Just finished the rosary with Lancaster Catholic, so I'm starting my day off on a good prayer spot.
Yeah, that's great. It's always fun for me as I'm leading to see you one of the first people up on my little checking in thing. And what's one of the reasons I wanted to speak to you today, because what seems like almost a month ago now, when we started the rosary digitally, you were one of the first people to jump in and take advantage of this online opportunity to pray the rosary as a community. And while you're part of our community more of an extended fashion, you're not exactly, internally on a day-to-day basis. So talk to me about why it is that you were so eager to jump in on this opportunity.
Well, I think behind the scenes, a lot of us were already talking about how do we do some communal prayer together during this time. And I think it's always helpful when we join our resources together, because we are one community. We're preparing our children to hopefully go to Lancaster Catholic, and we belong to one another. We have such a wonderful connection with you. And you're part of our daily life at Sacred Heart. We have the Christian service helpers who come multiple times a week to help our younger students. And we just have all these great programs because of you. So joining together seemed like a natural fit to making prayer accessible for many of our families.
Right. And that's a great thing to hear, knowing that there's this extended group of folks out there who maybe we don't think about every moment of every day, but are still connected with us. So that's a tremendous, that sort of was my thing too, is I was looking for a little comfort and connectedness to to people outside of my home here too. And I think this was a great way to do that. What's the challenges you find, in this time when normally we run to the church for things and now we're sort of forced to be separated?
I certainly feel it the same way that everyone else does, this separation. I was reflecting a little bit on, as you said earlier, that it's been about a month now, and probably the last social event that I was at that wasn't canceled was Lancaster Catholic's art show. I think that was the last thing I was present for, and I keep going back to that and thinking, it was like the week after that we wouldn't have even thought about gathering together, eating with one another, greeting one another the way that we did that evening. So definitely missing the sense of community here. I miss a lot too. I always tell our parents my favorite part of the day is waiting outside for the kids in the morning and getting to greet everyone and see everyone each day. So it's hard to be without that. But I think as we read, how do we live through this time of quarantine, this time apart from one another, that keeping a schedule and keeping connected are two of the most important things we can do. So I kind of put your rosary on my schedule from the very beginning. So, and it's been great because it has been a moment to connect with so many people. And so many of the names that pop up in the comment section are the people who I was with and my last social outing before the stay-at-home orders and the closures of schools. So it's really nice to continue to make that connection.
Well, right, and I just get such a charge of realizing that the reach of Lancaster Catholic in particular is so broad. I think when you're in the building working every day with students and you're seeing them, you sometimes forget that we're so connected to such a broad range of people scattered all over the place. See the alumni, checking in from who knows where they're at. I presume some of them are local, but many of them could be, in different states or different places. And it really does reinforce that sense of community.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Sister, as we move forward, hopefully this whole isolation thing ends in the not too distant future. But as we obviously go at least a couple more weeks, what's your plan moving forward for kind of continuing to connect with your community? And are you looking at new ways as you get more comfortable with the technology?
So we've, from the beginning, really tried to embrace every possible way to reach out to people through technology. At this point, I've had 2 live parent meetings where the parents can log on and see me so that I can continue to communicate with them what we're doing at Sacred Heart and how we're moving forward. And I've been able to talk to a lot of people on the phone and just connect with them that way. I do already have a tentative date for another parent meeting, anticipating that we'll have more to share when we come back from Easter. So I think that's been really helpful. But I also am going to continue to promote, the prayer opportunities that are especially local to us here, because I think, again, it grounds us in this community of people who we know and the local church that we're a part of. And it's important to do that with one another as we continue to move through this.
Right. And I just think more so than ever, I'm just hearing from a lot of students and other folks that I'm speaking with that people are realizing how important the community aspect of our Catholic faith is. That we're not just one person in Jesus or even one family in Jesus, that we are connected in a broad sense to so many people. And I think it really come to light in this current challenge.
One of the things I send out every day to our families is just a little newsletter with the schedule of the day of live events and things like that. And from the very beginning, we decided in the convent, there are 6 sisters who live here at Sacred Heart, that we would gather each day for adoration from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock, because we're blessed to live in a house with the Blessed Sacrament present. And one of the things I put on the schedule right away is, this is when we're going to be praying for you from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock every day. So sharing that with our parents and our families too. And of course, that's not limited to them. We're praying for the whole community right now who cannot be, as you said earlier, physically present in our churches the way that we all would like to be. We are trying to carry those prayers there too. And we've also put out, requests for prayer intentions so that we can remember those when we're gathered before the Blessed Sacrament as well. So it's another nice way to keep that connection and that structure of being together.
Right. And hopefully I can really foresee when this is all kind of settled down a little bit that we might all end up, in addition to just normal interaction, using some of these technology means to reach out to people who can't always be connected to us just for the sake of scheduling as well. So this may be a blessing in disguise in that regard.
Yeah, and I think we're all going to be grateful for a whole lot that we may have taken for granted before. I think we'll be really happy when we get back to church and someone is singing off key behind us, or funny things like that normally might irritate. I think we're all going to be very excited to
but when
have that experience back again.
We've had a couple campus ministry, just casual hangouts in the last couple of weeks, and hear the number of students who said, I used to hate to come to school and I wish now I could just be there. I would give anything to be at school right now. So I think that's telling in and of itself. So, but
one of the things we often say in the office is, like, if there's a snow day, we're like, oh, we can get so much work done because there aren't any interruptions. I will never say that again for the rest of my life.
Yes, I agree 100%. Because you and I are in ministry, and ministry really is interruption. That's the nature of what ministry is putting aside whatever you're doing at the moment, sometimes to deal with the human situation that's in front of you. So, I think now more than ever, some of us are like, that really was important, and putting off whatever task we were doing to a different time. That's a great gift that we now miss as we efficiently work from our bunkers wherever we're at. So, but anyway.
And we're doing it in different ways too, I think, because our families are doing that, and we're trying to be available to them. So it's a different type of interruption, but I can't wait till they're back in person.
I 100% agree. Well, sister, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Art.
And I continue to take great solace from your prayers, knowing that you're joining us in the morning, and just it's a great way to start the day to see all the regulars pop up on the
it is a great way to start the day.
A lot of new folks too. So, but anyway, well, thank you again, sister. I'm sure we'll talk in the future. And I hope your Holy Week goes very well, in spite of the fact that we're all stuck where we're at. And thanks so much, sister. It's great to see you, and it's great to have you pray with us each and every day on our morning rosary. Well, that's it. Another episode of the Campus Ministry Podcast. We're excited to be able to provide this to you. I hope it's some benefit to you. Don't forget to keep checking in on the Lancaster Catholic Facebook page, our Instagram page the Campus Ministry has, and on our website for all the pertinent information as we continue to look forward to the day when we're back together as a community at Lancaster Catholic High School. God bless from Ms. Balsky and myself. This is Mr. Bamert, Director of Campus Ministry, signing off for this episode of the Lancaster Catholic Campus Ministry Podcast.